Hey everyone, Tactics here, and in this video I'm going to be giving you guys the rundown on Protection Warrior and how it's looking in Dragonflight. This includes discussing the massive talent rework, what kind of new and returning abilities you're going to be having to play with, alongside a couple of builds that'll work in Mythic Plus and Raid, kind of my thoughts behind maybe potential talent choices that are more situational. I'll talk about their tier bonus from this first raid, and as well as just what all that stuff in general combined means for Prot Warrior overall. I'll be doing videos just like this one for all 6 tank specs, so make sure you guys do subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss out. And let's start by talking about their tier. So their 2 and 4 piece bonuses respectively are Revenge, grants you Vanguard's Determination, increasing your damage done and reducing your damage taken by 4% for 5 seconds. And during this Vanguard Determination window, you gain Ignore Pain equal to 5% of the damage you deal. Now, in terms of tier bonus, especially tanks, this is a pretty solid one for Prot Warrior. So the 2-piece bonus, you'll be able to keep that up quite a high uptime, if not 100% uptime, right? Revenge is just something you're casting quite a bit of, and especially the current state of Prot Warrior, you have quite a bit of excess rage, so you'll be revenging a fair bit. There's also a ton of talents that kind of amp the damage of revenge as well, so it's going to be a button you want to press fairly often anyways. So this 4% damage done and damage taken reduction is something that you're going to have up a lot of the time. Looking at your 4-piece bonus, on like maybe in wording it doesn't actually sound that good, but honestly this is pretty nuts, especially with the synergy it actually has with one of your talents, which I'll explain a bit more later. But basically this gives warriors a ton of Ignore Pain overall in combination with that talent, which just helps them a lot, right? You always have that Ignore Pain buffer because again you're always pretty much having this Vanguard Determination buff up, so you're always going to be able to have damage done give you that Ignore Pain. It's just a nice little buffer for Prot Warriors. One thing I will say a bit of a negative about this tier set is it does kind of take away a little bit from the execute style gameplay once you get to that phase, because of course you need to be spending your rage on revenge to keep up the 2 and 4-piece buff. Right, so if you're spending rage on revenge, usually in execute phase, especially in single target, that would swap to spending it on execute, but that's something that you can't really do anymore. So the execute damage of warriors has kind of been, or Prot Warriors anyways, has kind of been hacked down a little bit with this tier bonus, but overall it's still a very strong bonus, and that's a decent trade-off for what you're gaining. If we're looking about the state of Prot Warrior in general, before we actually hop into the talent trees themselves, so far so good. So obviously Prot Warrior saw a pretty massive change in the talents that got pretty much nerfed across the board and then reorganized in their talent tree, going from BFA Season 4 to Shadowlands Season 1, and they lost a lot. They were not looking too hot at the beginning of Shadowlands. The reprisal getting added shortly after the release of Shadowlands helped a little bit, but it was rough out there as a Prot Warrior at the beginning of Shadowlands. The beginning of Dragonflight is not going to be anything like that. So if you remember Shadowlands coming in at the beginning, shield block uptime was atrocious, rage generation wasn't great, things just didn't really synergize and fit together very well, because now all those synergies were kind of on the same talent rows as each other, and it just felt bad. I am happy to say that that is going to be completely changing with the new Dragonflight talent system. A lot of those synergies have kind of unlocked again. You're able to get them all together, or have the option to at the very least. And that has a couple of insane benefits for Prot Warrior. One, rage generation is through the roof. You have so much rage, especially in AoE, particularly in AoE, but in single target as well. I mean, you have the ability to also spec into even more rage generation. You have a lot of choices for rage generation, so you can kind of pick and choose how much you need, which is so good. It feels so good to play. You don't feel resource starved unless you like avoid all your rage generation talents, right? And on top of that, you actually have pretty solid solid. You have insane shield block uptime. It's really really nuts. You have so much rage, obviously you can always shield block whenever you need to. There's like a pseudo like reprisal ability that basically gives you like a third charge on a longer CD, right? It's like a 45-second ability to like fill in gaps. Heavy repercussions is like an option all the time now, which lets you extend those shield blocks. You get a passive like 2-second extension on shield block. It's just, you are shield blocking everything you need to. You have so much rage. It feels great. You are, because of this and because of the 4-piece giving you a ton of ignore pain as well, you are just like one of the tankiest tanks out there. Maybe like rivaling Blood DK. Blood DK is still very, very tanky, of course, but Prot Warrior is right up there with them. And they have a ton more tools now to handle magic damage with, Spell Reflect. There's a spell block ability that lasts super long time and is low CD. There's like impending victory for self-healing, passive leech. You get like 10% passive leech in the protection warrior tree. It's absolutely crazy. And warrior, honestly, out of all the tanks I've played, like warrior feels really, really, really good. And the damage is nothing to scoff at either. Like Prot Warrior is not doing the most damage out of any tank, but it's definitely top 3 in both AoE and single target. So it's just a well-rounded, strong defensive, strong offensive tank, and it's going to be a fantastic option for any content you want to do. From there now, let's actually take a look at the talent tree. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about this because this is where a ton of the interesting stuff happen. So let's start off with the more simpler tree, maybe the actual general tree of the warrior. So starting off the bat here, you're likely going to want to grant War Machine, as well as Spell Reflect for defensiveness, Fast Footwork, Frothing Berserker for some revenge, Rage Refund, and again, just like your 2-piece, kind of encourages you to revenge a lot. You're going to be revenging a fair bit, so extra rage is nice. You can grab your Rallying Cry as well as 5% leech, and Thunderclap as well as a 5% auto attack speed increase. Something to note on Spell Reflect, it will actually now remain on you, the DR, once you've reflected a spell. So that's just a nice little change to Spell Reflect, nice little quality of life thing that helps out protection warriors a little bit. But now we've moved on to the second row of talents here. We've unlocked that. Notice we haven't gotten things like Intervene. Intervene no longer has that DR associated with it. That was a conduit that isn't returning. And so it's lost a fair bit of value unless you're specifically targeting a certain ability that you can intervene consistently. If that doesn't happen, Intervene doesn't really have a ton of value for warriors, unfortunately. But moving down, we've got some shield slam damage as well as armor increase. And we've got Blood and Thunder, which actually not only gives you Thunderclap damage, but it causes your Thunderclap to actually apply Rend for you. So when you end up taking Rend in the protection tree, you actually never need to press the button. Moving down the tree here, Double Time is gating a leech node for us further down in the tree, so we do need to take that. And this is where you kind of have some choice in what you're taking. So let's talk Mythic Plus here for a second. There are some Mythic Plus specific talents you most definitely want. First, obviously, Stormbolt is a stun. You get that back. That's a nice little single target stop. Revenge is going to be a pretty decent portion of your damage, so taking that 25% increased damage, it does make it cost 10 more rage. So while this may not be the most ideal in some situations, overall it's pretty good, especially for Mythic Plus. You also, Seismic Reverberation, you're going to in general have that target hit count to have this do its extra damage, so always a nice slot in there. And at this point you have 4 extra points, and this is where you can kind of play around with what you want. There are a couple things here. Obviously there's Heroic Leap, a nice little mobility thing to have at least 1 point in. You can also get Bounding Stride. For Mythic Plus, I tend to lean away from Bounding Stride. I don't find it to be super necessary, but it is there if there's ever a use for it. There's also Intimidating Shout, AoE Stop, though this is on a 1.5 minute cooldown, and it is target capped at 6 targets, so you can pick one of them, so you know exactly which one is guaranteed to be stopped, and then it's 5 additional. So keep that in mind. It is a fairly long cooldown for that kind of stop, so it may not be the most value. There's a little bit of damage over here in Sidearm, fairly low, around 2% damage in AoE in my testing. So usable, but not the biggest damage increase. There's also the Shield Slam CDR here. 1 second on Shield Slam also counts Pummel. something to think about. Pain and Gain I actually don't really like taking too often. It's that passive healing conduit from Shadowlands as well. That was a general conduit for everyone. But basically, because of how our 4-piece interacts, you always have like that buffer of ignore pain, and you have shield blocking a lot of stuff in general. It's really not the biggest deal, and you don't really get the most value out of this talent. I actually much prefer taking Impending Victory, which is an on-use 25-second CD that gives you a big self-heal. I find this much more valuable than Pain and Gain. You also have the ability here to take fear removal, as well as a CD that removes fear from the rest of your party. You also have the ability to buff your Rallying Cry here. It's not quite as good as the Conduit in Shadowlands. It's a nerfed version, but still can be nice. You have the ability to increase your rage by a little bit. Sometimes useful, not always. So you have some options. You have quite a few options here. Just going to default, I'm going to say let's take Sidearm, and let's take Bounding Stride. Two perfectly fine talent choices there. Then we unlock our capstone row here. So right off the bat, 100% you want Avatar. This is going to give you some strength equal to your armor, and Unstoppable Force, of course, giving you extra Thunderclap and Shockwave damage, and it reduces the cooldown of Thunderclap during Avatar. And then you really want a lot of these top nodes. You see that 5% leech, 1 point, great. This is 1% haste, as well as crits, giving your auto attack speed 10% increase for 10 seconds. That's very good. You get that up 2 points to 20%. And then you kind of want to choose. So there's a couple options you can go here. And this is, again, where Mythic Plus, like maybe mid to low Mythic Plus versus high Mythic Plus. I really think you're never going to give up Shockwave in high keys. So your tree's going to look something like this. Shockwave also is a surprising amount of damage. So it has a pretty high damage number on its baseline. There's a ability that increases it by 350% and makes it always crit. So it's a pretty massive increase. This is 15-second CDR, as well as like a range increase. And then, of course, again, that amp that is on Avatar that makes it also do another 20% more damage. Here it is, or 50% more damage, sorry. So even more than that. Shockwave blasts. Shockwave does a lot of damage. And obviously it is also that 2-second AoE stop, now on like a 25-second cooldown, assuming you hit 3 targets. It's very good in Mythic Plus. If you're looking at something like raids, for example, we're going to, of course, take out the Shockwave points here. Seismic Reverberation is also something that's likely not going to be taken. You can move it into something like your Shield Slam CDR, because you're going to be facing a lot more single target. Obviously, also Sidearm loses a ton of value in that scenario, so you could move that over to Pain and Gain again, just because much less value in pure single target or lower target counts in general. And then you come back down to this bottom part. You definitely probably are sticking with Unstoppable Force. You may see a movable object a little bit, maybe early on in the tier in high-end content, just in low target counts specifically, just to give you some more DR and even a little bit more damage from your shield wall. But likely Unstoppable Force is going to be the general play overall. Wild Strikes here, your Leech, and then you're going down and getting Thunderous Roar this time, which is basically an AoE bleed. That's going to be on a 1-minute CD thanks to this, and it's also going to amp the bleed damage of your other abilities here. What do they call their Deep Wounds and Rend as well, getting an extra 15% damage on those bleed effects on top of it. That does leave you with the 1 point. 5% stam is right there, easily accessible. 1% crit and 5% execute damage. But as we did mention previously, that execute damage is a little bit less valuable to Prot Warriors given our current tier situation. Also, looking back at this, actually, you definitely don't want this Pain and Gain, I think. Forgot about buffed Rallying Cry up there. There you go. This is a pretty default raid setup for Protection Warrior here. You have some other options, right? Like if it's a multi-target fight, you can move more towards the Mythic Plus build, but run Thunderous Roar instead of Shockwave. You have a little bit of passive healing here if you ever need it. Intervene if you ever need it for anything. There's a Sidearm here if you're doing some AoE stuff, but even then it's a little meh. If you really need a Dispel for anything, Bitter Immunity is there, but honestly, this trait's kind of been nerfed into oblivion. It's not too useful in its current state, unless you like really need to dispel something in like a dungeon maybe, and you just don't have that healer that has that dispel in said dungeon. But even then, it's a 3-minute CD, so unfortunate, but not the greatest. Not the greatest. All right, let's go talk about the actual protection warrior tree itself. So starting off the top here, ignore pain. We got revenge, demo shout, last stand, devastator, just taking everything down the row. And this is where you start deviating. So strategist, of course, you need your resets. You got 2 points left. Likely best served cold to move down this area, because otherwise you're competing with heroic bro. And here I'm going to go with brace for impact. Extra shield slam damage, extra block, always nice. And you really, I don't know how many times you say this, like you have the option to get more rage gen in the Prot Warrior tree, but a lot of times you're going to give that up because Prot Warrior rage gen is very good right now. That brings us to our big talent here that we have that interacts with our tier, which is Brutal Vitality. 30% of the damage you deal adds to your active ignore pain. Now, the real problem with this one is it doesn't put up the ignore pain, but funnily enough, your 4-piece does. So insane interaction there. You basically get a 30% additional ignore pain on top of your 4-piece, which is already a 5%. That applies the ignore pain. And it's fantastic synergy. You always will want to run this talent. That is the only real super synergistic talent with that, so that's really the only mandatory talent, but you're always, no matter what, going to be wanting to run Brutal Vitality with our tier. Moving across here, of course, Rend, need that, so Thunderclap can apply it. Free bleed damage. Blood Surge, your bleed effects have a chance to grant you rage. That includes your deep wounds, that includes Rend, as well as Thunderous Roar if you are spec'd into it. So nice little rage boost there. Shield wall, of course. Moving down, anger management, you got to take that. And something that really helps with your shield block uptime is this 2-second longer shield block. You are giving up massacre for that, but as I mentioned, execute is not going to be the greatest specifically for Prot Warrior. They're not going to be insane execute specialists, kind of like they were at the end of Shadowlands, but shield block uptime is a little crazy, so we're going with this. On the left side here, we've got challenging shout, AoE taunt. Thunderlord is returning as well, so Thunderclap reduces the CD of Demo Shout. And we've got a choice down here between Heavy Repercussions and Into the Fray. You'd think this would be a more difficult decision, but honestly, you get enough stats for the most part that you really don't need this extra haste here. And Heavy Repercussions really helps your shield block uptime, as well as more single target rage gen, because that tends to be where Warrior sometimes has problems with rage gen. It's not all the time, but that's where you can run into some issues with I don't have enough rage to do what I want to do, which is purely in single target. So this helps out a little bit with that and also extends those shield blocks, which is really nice. Still have to spend 3 points here, and you have a few choices. Whether you're going to run Impenetrable Wall or not, or sometimes in Mythic Plus, of course, Unbreakable Will can be a party-wide shield wall, as well as 2 charges of shield wall, whereas this is even more shield wall CDR and more rage on shield slam as well. This would likely be more of a default in raiding content, whereas this would be more of a default in high-end Mythic Plus content. But if you want a lot of damage, for example, if it's like a 2, 3, 4 target cleave, right? Council, there's a council fight, which is a 4 target cleave fight. Bloodborne is going to be a ridiculous amount of damage because you will constantly have bleeds up on all your targets. And you'd also, in that case, run Thunderous Roar with the further bleed damage amp, and it would just do an absurd amount of damage. Punish is great for shield slam damage as well, and that unlocks your next row in this case. But if you're not doing that, what you can do is you can run one of these center traits. Spell block will be good for certain bosses as well. Lets you block spells. Fantastic. 20 seconds long, 1.5 minute CD. Actually crazy. Very strong. Note though the changes to spell block, obviously, so it doesn't affect dots anymore, so it's not as strong as it would appear at first glance, but still very good and very helpful for Prot Warriors. If you don't have anything that you can make use of, Tough as Nails is a pretty low damage ability, but it gives you damage, and you really don't need Bolster. Bolster is right here. If for whatever reason you kind of want, hey, you know, I really want the extra, you know, maybe you need CD overlap or something from the last end being on a 2-minute instead of a 3-minute, or whatever it is. But you really don't need it for the shield block uptime, especially in raids. So it's actually a pretty powerful talent that you'd want to take, but you don't necessarily need it to take. That accesses punish for you as well as the next row, and that gives you the option to take this over here for impenetrable wall. And again, we're moving down here. So kind of like the capstone over here, you want to take all these talents at the top here. It's just free stats. This one is the most optional. It's 5% stam and armor, and you can access Ravager via this. So it's kind of the most optional. You'd much rather have the strength over here. It gives 1% crit. This gives 1% haste, but the 5% strength is a big enough difference that you much rather have that. Moving down here, violent outburst, kind of similar to a tier currently. Indomitable, of course, is a nice passive little healing thing. Booming Voice gives you additional rage on Demo Shout, which you're already CDRing with Thunderlord, and makes it so you deal more damage. You can get some shield charge. So this is kind of like Reprisal, but an ability now with Champion's Bulwark. So it's an AoE hit, a single target stun. It gives you a bunch of rage, and then it also will grant you shield block and the revenge proc. So this can also be used basically as like a 45-second cooldown, extra charge of shield block kind of deal. Really helps, and this is one of the reasons why like shield block uptime is very good right now. You know, the 2 seconds longer, this ability, all the rage, all that stuff, and the extensions is kind of how that works. All these things just synergizing together makes it very strong. And now we're kind of in the point of like, okay, what do we get from here? Raid bosses, are you in danger? Are you scared of needing this kind of like pseudo cheat death at the bottom of the talent tree? You can grab that, great. Otherwise, Ravager, it can be nice for additional rage gen in down moments. It is a 1.5 minute CD now, so do note that, but that's something you can use. But you can also say, you know what, I want Ravager, and I'm just going to sack this 5% stam armor or 1% haste and grab that. Mythic Plus is likely to do something more like this. You also have a couple good situational talents over here. Disrupting Shout, which is your AoE taunt, gets a 30-second CDR and it makes it a 6-second silence. That's pretty nuts, actually, if you ever get used to that. Wouldn't be surprised to see that a fair bit in Mythic Plus as well. You also have that revenge damage boost over here that also increases Thunderclap damage. That can be nice, as well as just a pure damage trait. But overall, I mean, the story with Prot Warrior is there's so many good talents, and you just can't really pick them all, which is honestly a very good problem to have. You have so much synergy in this tree. It gives you a ton of rage generation. It gives you a ton of shield block uptime, and you have the option if other builds, future patches, right? If execute builds kind of open up and you already have good shield block uptime, all of a sudden, hey, I'm switching to a bunch of different execute talents. That could be, really interesting. And I'm really happy with the current state of Prot Warrior. I think, redemption for the state they've been in for a lot of Shadowlands, not all of it, but a decent amount of it. I think they've helped to make the gameplay feel a lot more fun. Personally, I wasn't the biggest fan of like the Reprisal Necrolord gameplay, but this I am fully on board with. I'm really happy with how the spec is looking, and it's looking quite strong. That wraps up this video though, guys. Remember, if you enjoy the content, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. Again, all tanks will be covered in a similar fashion, so if you want to trying to figure out what you want to main still, make sure you guys stay tuned. They'll be coming out over the next week or so. I also stream over on my Twitch channel at Tactics. I do all kinds of mythic rating, high keys, beta stuff, of course. Every beta weekend that keys are open, I am over there spamming keys. So come hang out, say hi, ask any questions you guys have. Let me know anything you guys think I missed down in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.